Hello everyone, welcome to this online sample class. My name is Thomas and today we're going to have a very quick sample class. Some students might consider that studying law might be difficult because they think, well, is my English good enough? They are concerned about the ability to understand the content in class because they might not have the experience of studying law before. They might not have the experience of being in a university class environment, or they simply are concerned that there are so many different concepts and they may not be able to catch up. So one of the objectives of today's class is basically just to really get you to understand what a law class is like. So let's talk about this class. Business associations is one of the topics for the certificate in legal studies. And along with the other modules, we have 5 modules in the certificate in legal studies, and business associations is one of the main 5 modules of this course. And when we talk about business associations, at the very beginning, we talk about the different types of business associations. Okay? And in reality, in the real world, right? There are many people who ask, if they want to start a business, what are my options for a business associations? Or put it another way, if I want to run a business in Hong Kong, what should I do legally to start this venture? If you look at many business plans, there are different aspects of a business plan. Whether you're talking about, the mission statement, or you're talking about, how to get money, how to achieve success in the business, the financial projections, and so on, right? One other very important aspect in the business plan is also business associations, which means that how exactly are you going to, run the business? What legal form are you going to use? Because this has an impact upon both the people inside the business and also people outside the business as well. For example, if you choose a sole proprietorship, that has a different impact upon the owner and outsiders. If you choose something like a firm or a partnership, different legal consequences. If you choose a company or corporation, once again, different legal consequences, right? So these are the main 3 categories of business associations in Hong Kong. In law, we have to use language very precisely. Does a business equal a company? Does a firm equal a company? While in, ordinary business terminology, you can use some of this interchangeably. In law, you can't, because language has to be very precise. If you're talking about a business, there are different ways of running a business. If you're talking about a firm, that doesn't mean a company, that means a partnership. So, we have to be careful in how we use, different, words. Let's talk about the first type. Let's talk about the sole trader or sole proprietorship. It's basically a one-person business, right? Sole means one, and it's a one-person business, and he or she is doing many things at the same time because they're ultimately responsible for the business. For example, someone running a newspaper stand, someone who is running a shoe polishing store, someone who's running a cafe or a restaurant, things like that. So these are all very common types of business associations. So simplicity is the key thing about this type of business association, simplicity, right? It's very easy to conceptualize, it's very easy to think about, to manage, to run, right? It's a one-person business, okay? And all you need to do is to get a business license. So there are some key advantages and disadvantages. So it's very easy to set up. All you need to have basically is a business license. Okay, it's relatively easy to make business decisions because you're a one-person business, and because you're one person, right? It's more efficient. There's no committees, no meetings. You don't have to share the profit of anyone else. And so imagine you running a one-person business. Most likely, you're going to have a very close connection with your customers. On the other hand, there are some disadvantages, right? Where you're going to get the money from, a limited source of financing, right? So money is a question, right? You can hire employees, you can hire contractors, you can hire consultants, etc. But you are ultimately responsible for the business, right? There's no one to really share the burden with, and you have unlimited personal liability because you, the human being, you're responsible for all aspects of the business. If something goes wrong with the business, you are responsible, right? So you're the only person that's liable, and you might lose all your money, all your assets, right? Whatever you have, your jewelry, your car, your apartment, etc. Right? So you have to be a little bit more careful, when you're running a sole proprietorship. So you need a business license. This is a sample of business license or business registration certificate. It's very common. You might have seen it in restaurants, cafes, or something like that. Let's talk about the second type of business associations. Let's talk about a partnership, right? So a partnership is basically a business run by two or more people, and the business has to be a for-profit business. If you look at section 3.1 of the Partnership Ordinance, you can see that it says the following. It's about a relationship, a business relationship between persons, right? Two or more people, okay? So it can be 3, 2, 5, 100, etc. But it has to be a business which is for profit, and it has to be the same business, right? So it can't be two people running separate businesses in the same venue. It has to be two people running the same business together. And there are some advantages and disadvantages of a partnership, right? More people means more money, easier to get that money, easy to set up. All you need to have is a contract between these people to do the business together. More people means more, sharing of workload, sharing of skills, sharing of liability, etc., right? But there are some disadvantages. It's not all roses and rainbows, right? So once again, we encounter this issue of unlimited personal liability, right? Which means that even though you can have 2 or 3 or more people, individually, you're still liable for the business. So if a customer wants to sue, they can elect to sue one partner, 2 partners, just one of them, all right, etc. Each partner is fully liable for the business debts. The firm is not a separate legal person. There's a possible conflict between partners because, for example, more people means the more potential for disagreements, right? And you might be thinking, what do I mean by this one? A firm is not a separate legal person. Well, unlike a company, which we'll talk more about in a moment, the firm is just the sum of its parts, right? It's just a bunch of people doing business together. And the bunch of people is directly responsible for the business. Because you have more people, it's vital that you discuss with your partners before making business decisions. Because if one partner agrees to something in a business, that business decision could potentially be bounding upon all the other partners. So if A makes a decision, B can be liable. If B makes a decision, A might be responsible, right, for that decision. So let's talk about another type of business associations, right? Let's talk about um, a company. And there are many kinds of companies, right? For-profit, non-profit. Hong Kong U is a company, did you know? Hong Kong U Space is a company, right? We're a non-profit making university company limited by guarantee. And there are many uses of a company, right? Most people think about a company being used for trading, for carrying on a business. Doesn't have to be. You can use a company just to hold assets, to hold property, a vehicle for investment, running government enterprises, acting as a trust for the benefit, for example, of children, you know. So what is the definition of a company? Basically, it is a legal entity, right? And it's a legal entity which is separate from the owners, right? So for a you know, company which is limited by shares, there'll be shareholders. Well, the shareholders and a company are not the same thing, right? Just because you're a shareholder of HSBC doesn't mean that you are HSBC, right? There's two different things. But there, for a company, they share, some of the aspects, of a human being, in that they share their rights and liabilities, right? What do I mean by that? Well, a company is similar in a way to a person in the legal sense. You can sue, be sued, own property, sell property, be responsible just like a human being, right? But unlike a human being, a company can live forever. For example, you have many companies where the founder has already passed away. The colonel died a long time ago. You can still get fried chicken. Steve Jobs passed away, but you still have Apple being very successful, right? And for a company, they confer upon the owners and the managers limited liability. It's like a shield, right, protecting you from the liabilities of the business. And just like anything else, right, there are pros and cons. Okay, so um, there are pros and cons of a very common type of company, a company called private limited company. Okay, so there are many types: public, private, limited, unlimited, right? But the most common type is a private limited company. Okay, and there are some advantages and disadvantages of a private limited company. Right? Limited liability for the shareholders, for the managers. Perpetual, life doesn't, need to die. And if the owners, one of the shareholders or directors pass away, the company can still continue. It's much easier to get financing in terms of, getting a loan, getting people to invest. It's a separate legal entity, right? The company is not the owners is not the company. It's much easier to transfer shares, than to ask someone to become a partner in a partnership. The ownership and management are separate. If I buy some shares in HSBC, it doesn't mean I have the right to manage the business. If I'm a director, it doesn't mean automatically I'm the owner, right? So these two concepts are distinct. But there are also some disadvantages, right? You need to have a much more active role in complying with the law. The Companies Ordinance, for example, in terms of when you start the company, you need to incorporate. When you are running the company, there's a lot more documentation, a lot more compliance things you need to do. When you stop running the company, you need to close down the company via a special procedure called liquidation. Right? So it's a little bit more complicated than, say, um, you know, a sole proprietorship or a partnership. So let's look at, a sample question, right? So this is a very typical real life hypothetical legal problem. You have Mary, Maple, and Martha. They want to run a business as a caterer, right? Serving food at functions, events, and so on. And they want to all to take part in managing the business, but they're keen to avoid personal liability for the debts, and they want the arrangement be kept as private as possible. And in the future, if the business is successful, they want to transfer the business without too many problems. So if you forget about tax, what would be the best kind of business associations for the purpose, right? So, how do you answer this question? Well, if you look at this question or this set of facts and you break it down, well, there are, a couple of possibilities, right? Are they going to be a sole proprietorship? The answer is no. They can't be a sole proprietorship because there are more than one person, right? Mary, Maple, and Martha. 3 people. So you either have the choice of a company or you have the choice of being in a partnership, right? They all want to manage the business. Both a private limited company and a partnership will allow them to manage the business. They want to avoid personal liability, right? So both, the form of a company would be better for avoiding personal liability, right? So you got a choice of a partnership or a company, so you have a choice of both type of business associations. Then you might want to think about, if I want to avoid personal liability, I might want to choose a private limited company because that gives me some legal protection for avoiding direct liability. If you want to keep things as private as possible, right, then a partnership might be better because you don't need to have any registration, you don't need to tell the world that you're a partner, there's less information given to outsiders, right? If you want to transfer the business to someone else, then maybe a company is better, right? Because it's much easier for people to buy and sell shares in a company than to ask someone to become a partner in a partnership, right? So there is no absolute answer. Depends on what you or the client thinks is important, right? So that's sometimes the law is not so black and white, or the answer is not so black and white, because there are several options available, and you're trying to present to people, a pathway for them to decide what the option is. You're not there to decide for them. You're there merely to give them the best information possible. So anyway, so this is a very quick, almost 20 minutes of a sample class, and I hope you enjoy this class. If you have any questions about the program, please let us know. We're available online, by email, by phone. You can talk to us on Instagram, talk to us on Facebook as well. Okay, thank you very much and have a very nice evening.